In 1937, a U.S. Army captain named Paul Logan walked into the office of Milton Hershey with a request that sounded like insanity. He asked the world's most famous confectioner to build a chocolate bar that violated the fundamental rule of the food industry. He did not want it to be delicious. He did not want it to be creamy or sweet. He explicitly demanded that it must taste only a little better than a boiled potato. This was not a joke. It was a cold, calculated logistical decision. It would eventually put 3 billion units of energy into the pockets of American GIs. This is the story of the Ration D bar, the weaponized chocolate engineered to be hated. It was a marvel of food science that saved thousands of lives by being inedible. To understand why the Army wanted bad chocolate, we must first look at the calorie mathematics of modern warfare. A soldier in combat burns between 4,000 and 5,000 calories a day, double the requirement of a civilian. If you fail to deliver those calories, the soldier's body begins to cannibalize itself. Within 48 hours, muscle tissue breaks down, and combat effectiveness drops to zero. In 1937, the U.S. Quartermaster Corps was analyzing the emergency ration. This was the food a soldier carried for the absolute worst-case scenario. If a unit was cut off from supply lines or dropped behind enemy lines, this ration was their lifeline. It was the only thing standing between them and starvation in the field. The problem with standard chocolate was human nature. If you gave a soldier a delicious Hershey bar as an emergency ration, he would eat it immediately. He would eat it while waiting for the truck. He would eat it because he was bored. He would eat it because he was hungry for a snack, not saving it for survival. Captain Logan realized that the emergency ration had to be unpalatable enough to resist temptation. A soldier should only eat it if he was literally dying of hunger. It was a psychological engineering problem. The food had to be calorie-dense, but taste like punishment. There was also a physical engineering problem. Heat. Standard chocolate melts at 93 degrees Fahrenheit, which is perfect for the mouth but fatal for the pocket. The U.S. Army knew a war was coming in the Pacific. In the Philippines or Guadalcanal, the temperature inside a soldier's pack could reach 120 degrees. Standard chocolate would turn into a brown liquid sludge. It would ruin the uniform, the equipment, and the morale of the soldier carrying it. So Captain Logan gave Milton Hershey 4 specific engineering constraints for the new bar. Constraint 1, it must weigh exactly 4 ounces. Constraint 2, it must contain 600 calories. Constraint 3, it must withstand temperatures of up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit without melting. Constraint 4, it must taste terrible. Hershey's engineers went to work, abandoning the formulas that made them rich. They couldn't use the standard milk chocolate process called Conching, which creates smoothness. For the Ration D, they removed the smoothness entirely. They used oat flour to thicken the mixture and drastically reduce the sugar. They reduced the cocoa butter fat, which lowers the melting point. They replaced it with cocoa powder and skim milk powder to create a dense matrix. The result was a paste so thick it couldn't be poured into molds like normal chocolate. It had the consistency of wet concrete and actually broke the factory machinery trying to mix it. The engineers had to invent new methods to handle the sludge. They had to knead the chocolate mixture like bread dough before pressing it. It was then forced into molds by heavy hydraulic presses rather than poured. The final product was a dark, dense brick that was almost impossible to bite into. You had to shave pieces off with a knife to eat it, or you had to smash it against a rock to break it into edible chunks. It didn't melt in the sun. In fact, it barely melted on your tongue. It sat there, a stubborn lump of calories that refused to dissolve. When the first batch was delivered to the Quartermaster Corps for testing in Panama, the results were perfect. The soldiers hated it. They called it Hitler's secret weapon. They claimed it caused dysentery and stomach pain. In reality, it was just the high calorie density hitting an empty stomach too hard. But most importantly, they didn't eat it for fun. They kept it in their pockets for weeks, untouched, just as Logan intended. The logistical objective was achieved. The calorie reserve remained intact until the moment of absolute crisis. When the war officially started in 1941, the demand for Ration D exploded. The Quartermaster Corps ordered millions of bars, forcing Hershey to convert its entire factory. The logistics of producing this much chocolate required a global supply chain. Cocoa beans came from West Africa and South America. Sugar came from the Caribbean. German U-boats were sinking merchant ships in the Atlantic. They were targeting specifically these kinds of resources to starve the Allied economy. The price of cocoa skyrocketed, and the U.S. government rationed sugar for civilians. Hershey was granted War Production Board priority status, classifying chocolate as essential industry. But the Ration D was just one part of the nutritional arsenal. The Army also needed a field ration for daily use, not just emergencies. This led to the creation of the Tropical Bar in 1943. The Army realized that while Ration D was great for survival, soldiers in the Pacific needed a daily snack. They couldn't eat the Ration D every day without morale plummeting. Food is morale. If you feed men boiled potato-flavored chocolate for 3 years, they will mutiny. So Hershey developed the Tropical Bar as a compromise. It was heat-resistant like the Ration D, capable of withstanding 120 degrees, but it tasted somewhat like actual chocolate. It was still gritty and didn't melt in your mouth, but it was sweet enough to be a treat. The manufacturing numbers are staggering. Between 1941 and 1945, Hershey produced over 3 billion ration bars. At the peak of production, the factory in Pennsylvania was churning out 24 million bars per week. It was the largest chocolate production run in human history. But the logistics of distribution were even more complex than the manufacturing. These bars had to be packed into K-Rations and C-Rations and shipped globally. They traveled by rail to the coasts and were loaded onto Liberty ships. They sat in warehouses in England, baked in the sun in North Africa, and froze in the Ardennes. The heat-resistant formula proved its worth in the Pacific theater. Marines on islands like Saipan and Iwo Jima carried these bars in their pockets for days, while other food rotted in the humidity or was contaminated by insects. The Hershey bar remained a sterile, sealed block of energy ready for consumption. There are countless reports of soldiers surviving on nothing but Ration D bars. When cut off from their units, this brick of calories was the only thing keeping them alive. But the bars served another purpose, one that Captain Logan never anticipated. They became the currency of the war in the shattered economies of Europe. Paper money was worthless. The Reichsmark had collapsed. The franc was unstable. But a Hershey bar was real value. It was calories, sugar, and fat. Commodities that had vanished from Europe for 5 years were suddenly back. American GIs used chocolate to pay for laundry, to buy souvenirs, and to buy companionship. A single tropical bar could buy a bottle of wine. It was the gold standard of the liberation, more valuable than gold itself. The ubiquity of the Hershey bar also became a potent propaganda tool. When American troops entered a liberated town, they threw chocolate to the children. This seems like a cliché from a movie, but it was a calculated logistical flex. It demonstrated to the local population that the United States was incredibly wealthy. It showed they were so resource-rich that they could afford to give away luxury food. The German army, by comparison, was starving and rationing every crumb. They had Coca-Cola, a caffeine-laced dark chocolate, but it was rare. The average German infantryman had moldy bread and substitute coffee made from acorns. Seeing an American soldier casually toss a chocolate bar to a kid was a psychological blow. It signaled that the industrial war was over. The U.S. had won the resource battle. However, the chocolate war had a dark side for the rest of the world. The sheer volume of sugar and cocoa required deprived everyone else. In Britain, chocolate was rationed to a few ounces per week. In occupied Europe, it was a distant memory, something from a lost era. The U.S. monopoly on cocoa supply meant that American companies dominated the market. Hershey and Mars became the titans of the global confectionery industry after the war. The war solidified the American style of chocolate as the global standard. Before the war, European chocolate was superior. After, American chocolate was the taste of victory. But let's go back to the engineering. How good was the heat resistance? In 1944, the Army conducted tests in the Arizona desert, placing crates in direct sunlight. The internal temperature of the crates reached 140 degrees Fahrenheit. When they opened the crates, the bars were soft, but they had not lost their shape. They had not liquefied into a mess. When they cooled down at night, they hardened again into usable bricks. Compare this to British attempts to send chocolate to North Africa. Their standard bars melted into the packaging, creating a sticky mess that attracted ants. The Hershey engineering was a legitimate material science breakthrough. Using oat flour to create a protein scaffold inside the chocolate prevented structural collapse. It was arguably the first engineered food designed for extreme environments. It paved the way for the space food of the 1960s, prioritizing function over flavor. After the war, millions of surplus Ration D bars flooded the market. They were given to relief organizations to feed starving populations in Germany and Japan. Ironically, the bad-tasting chocolate designed to punish soldiers became life-saving food. Children in Berlin in 1946 didn't care that it tasted like a boiled potato. It was the first food they had seen in days. Milton Hershey died in 1945, never seeing the full legacy of his military contract. But the company he built had transformed from a candy maker into a pillar of industry. Hershey's received the Army-Navy E Award for Excellence in Production. It is rare for a food company to receive a military decoration. Usually these awards are reserved for bomb makers and shipyards. But the Ration D was a weapon. It fought fatigue. It fought starvation. It fought the laws of thermodynamics. The cost of the program ran into hundreds of millions in subsidies. Was it worth it? Consider the alternative. A soldier without energy makes bad decisions. A soldier who passes out from low blood sugar gets shot. If the Ration D saved even 1% of the troops from exhaustion, it paid for itself. The soldiers complained. They cursed the damned Hershey brick. They tried to trade it for cigarettes or socks. But when they were pinned down in a foxhole in the Ardennes, freezing and cut off, they ate it. And because they ate it, they had the energy to keep fighting. The story of the chocolate war challenges our perception of quality. In the civilian world, quality means it tastes good. In the military world, quality means it works when everything else fails. The Ration D was objectively the worst chocolate ever made. But logistically, it was the best chocolate ever made. It did exactly what the blueprint said it would do. It delivered 600 calories to a human body in a hostile environment without failing. The Sherman tank was criticized for thin armor, but it worked. The Ration D was criticized for its taste, but it worked. This is the recurring theme of American victory in World War II. Ugly, mass-produced, reliable solutions defeating elegant, fragile ones. Today, the U.S. military still uses high-energy bars, but they have improved the taste. Food science has advanced. We can now make heat-resistant chocolate that tastes good. But the Ration D remains a monument to a specific moment in time. A moment when a captain looked a billionaire in the eye and said, "Make it taste bad." And the billionaire said, "Yes, sir." It was a triumph of pragmatism over pleasure. So the next time you eat a Hershey bar, remember its angry grandfather. Remember the brick of oat flour and cocoa powder that traveled to the ends of the earth. It wasn't a treat, it was fuel, and it helped burn down the Axis powers.